So we're on.
Great.
I'm happy to be interviewing Dr. Yisrael Ziderman, who has been involved in techelet research for since the late 1960s. Actually, Dr. Ziderman has a PhD in dye chemistry and has been very enthusiastic about the development of techelet over the years. In no small part to his contributions, there are now thousands of people wearing techelet today. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
So I just want to start with a little bit about your personal background and your early career. Could you tell about your early life? Like, where specifically were you born, and what led to your immigration to Eretz Israel, and when was that?
I was born in London. My parents were born in London. Of course, they immigrated to England from Eastern Europe, somewhere my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 1936 in London, and as a baby, I was there as a little boy. But that was in 1936. But in 1939, when I was 3.5, the Second World War broke out, and that had an enormous effect on me and on my life. We living in London, we suffered from air attacks from the Germans throughout that period of 5 years, and during these air attacks on London, at the beginning they were bombers. And later on, the Germans invented missiles, which they sent directly from Europe without endangering their crews. And in these air raids, many homes were destroyed, including my home. At the end, my home was destroyed by the bombing, and the regular thing was the people without homes, they were sent to adopted by some family out in the country in order that they should be safe. And that happened 3 times. We came back once to London. We were bombed out a second time, and we were evacuated again. This time we were evacuated to a place near London, and the third time when we were bombed out, we were evacuated separately. I was already about 6 or 7, and I was evacuated. I was adopted by a family out in the nowhere in Wales. Excuse me.
Not a problem. So
Sorry. Being away from my parents and being adopted as a tiny kid, this had an enormous effect, I believe, on my character and the things that I was interested in, my mind. And I always look back at those times. For me, it was a happy time. I was mixing with people as a little kid. I didn't feel the danger of being caught up in the actual casualties of the war. The war ended, and at that time we were on our 3rd evacuation in Wales, in the city of Cardiff, the capital of Wales. And my parents said to me and my brother, it's time to settle down here now. The war is over. They had a thing called VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. After there was a victory in Japan Day, VJ Day. And anyway, my parents said, we're not going to now settle down here in Cardiff. I said, no, 7-year-old kid. I said, no, we're not going to let Hitler beat us. We are going back to our home in our home city, London. And my parents agreed. And I can say that I'm very pleased that happened, because this enabled me to grow up in London as a teenager and influence my way of thought and my education in many ways. I was very active in Bnei Akiva, a religious Zionist youth movement in the whole world, branches all over the world, and I was a leader in that youth movement, Bnei Akiva, in London, and eventually I was elected as head of the movement, the general secretary of Bnei Akiva in Britain, and I was in that job for 2 years, and after I finished my 2 years term in Bnei Akiva, we and my wife and our 3 children at that time, but we went on Aliyah to a kibbutz Shluchot in the Beit She'an Valley, Emek Beit She'an. Our reason for going to the kibbutz wasn't just a momentary idea. It was something which we had been preparing for and devoting ourselves to understanding the meaning of a religious kibbutz in Israel while we were members of Bnei Akiva as a chanich and as a madrich. And therefore, for me and my wife Pauline, it was a natural thing for us, when we were free from our obligations to the movement, to Bnei Akiva, to go on Aliyah as chalutzim, pioneers, to a kibbutz. And we chose Shluchot for various reasons, not important now. But it wasn't a love story. We didn't like the kibbutz life enough to stay, and therefore I looked for a job outside the kibbutz, and I found a job in Hebrew University, Jerusalem, where we moved and lived for many years until very, very recently. In Jerusalem, I had a job as a laboratory assistant in the biochemistry department of the Hebrew University under Professor Yeshaya Leibovich of blessed memory, and that place I had already had a first degree, a BSc in biochemistry, and then I continued to have a MSc and a PhD in biochemistry all the time. And at that time, we had been in Israel now for some years, and we had left the kibbutz in 1961, and after a few years, and something extraordinary happened. I received a phone call one morning, I was asked if I would read a text in English and prepare a short summary in Hebrew. Why? Because the people at the other end of the line, they were the Talmudic Encyclopedia, which is a Hebrew book, and they wanted to include a certain book among the sources in the encyclopedia, and they knew that I was a religious person and also a biochemist, if I would summarize it professionally, which I did. And I found that this book, this PhD thesis, was written by a previous chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Herzog. And in this it was a doctoral thesis of Rabbi Herzog, he wrote about techelet. What is techelet? Techelet is a blue dyed cloth or thread, and as tzitzit. This dye stuff, this blue dye stuff, is made from a chilazon in English, from a shellfish, and they wanted to include a reference to this in the encyclopedia, and so they asked me to read it. I read it and I summarized it. And as I was summarizing it, I realized that there was an interesting problem here. The doctoral thesis, in all its length, didn't reach a conclusion. It was trying to identify the shellfish, which was used as a source for the dye stuff, but Rabbi Herzog couldn't make up his mind which of three candidates, three different shellfish, were the actual source of the techelet dye for ritual purposes. Actually, in the book, in the doctoral thesis, it explained how the techelet dye, which we use as a dye for our tzitzit on our talit, this was generally used in antiquity. It was a very widespread dye, but very, very expensive. Probably one of the most expensive items that you could buy anywhere in the ancient world, in Roman and Greek times. And at those times, to get the dye from the shellfish was a big enterprise. Rabbi Herzog had three candidates for this animals that could be this shellfish, but he couldn't make up his mind which was the one that was used. And this was important at that time. Why? Because the techelet had not been used on the talit at all. Now let me just show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Here I can see tzitzit, and they are dyed with the techelet, which I discovered afterwards, as I'll immediately be relating. So those are the tzitziot on the talit of tzitziot of techelet. The next thing that I was interested, because I noticed, is from a professional point of view, that it was an open question, and this seemed to call to me to take an interest in it, which I did immediately. I started to collect researches, papers which had been reported and published since 1919, when Rabbi Herzog wrote his thesis. And I wanted to update each of those, and I thought maybe I would find an answer to the questions that Rabbi Herzog raised. And there are two particular questions which I'd like to which were crucial in this. One was in the Talmud, there are four signs, four characteristics which were used to identify the techelet shellfish, and one of them was very, very difficult for scholars throughout for many hundreds of years to try to fathom out what was meant by this particular characteristic, and that is the characteristic is his characteristic. Let me just recall. The characteristic is B'yam hamelach hu matsui, that this shellfish was in the Mediterranean Sea, and that was something which it wasn't understood. How can something live in the sea? But that wasn't the issue. The issue was one to do with עולה אחד ל-70 שנה, that only every 70 years does this shellfish come out of the sea. This has been understood throughout the ages as to mean that it appears in order to collect these shellfish, one has to wait 70 years until they will suddenly appear on the surface of the sea. And that's really impossible for a creature to only come up every 70 years. And this was a key characteristic which hasn't been solved. And then, so I went back to Maimonides, and Maimonides understands this in the way I've just mentioned, that the shellfish comes up once in 70 years, and it's in the Mediterranean Sea. So this means that in the Mediterranean Sea we can understand, but the 70 years, what does that mean? You have to wait for it to surface from the sea. And I said, this obviously, these two signs are connected, because Maimonides repeats the other signs. He repeats them word by word, except for this one, which he changes from it being in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, and Maimonides changed the sign from being in the Mediterranean Sea to coming up once in 70 years. So I said, when it says it comes up in 70 years, which has been understood until that time, through hundreds of years, as a very infrequent appearance, I said, well, this is not correct. Maimonides translates the sign of being in the Mediterranean Sea as it comes up once in 70 years. I said, that means once in 70 years means never. And we have other examples in the Talmud when they want to talk about something which is infrequent and no one ever has a chance of seeing it. They say 70 years. A Beth Din, for instance, which sentenced someone to death, is criticized in the Talmud, and one should do everything to save a person from the death penalty. And here, the Talmud says that a Beth Din, which sentences someone to death and execute themselves, they are called a murderous Beth Din, and or Sanhedrin. So the use of the phrase once in 70 years means never. This is the conclusion I reached, and it's simple and it's obvious. That was invented by Maimonides, as I just said. Because Maimonides, he invented the words. It exists in the Mediterranean Sea. So by explaining this sign, and this I was looking now for one of the three candidates that Rabbi Herzog had examined. It turned out now that two of them were completely disqualified for many reasons, not important now, by most scholars, but the sign of being able to catch it only and to fish it only in the sea where it lived, that closed the list of characteristics of the techelet shellfish. And then therefore I was able now to say that of the three shellfish or creatures which Rabbi Herzog had examined and considered that each one of them was a possible candidate, one of them was the one that Maimonides chose, and that was the one that was the source, the singular source of the techelet. I started to publicize this research, and at that time, and it wasn't accepted with much enthusiasm. People thought that this is a dead issue. Hundreds of years have passed before anyone had done any research on this. But anyway, I persevered, and eventually this became something living, which I've just shown you on my talit and the talitot here in the background of Rafi. They are the accepted now by many authorities, and you can buy them anywhere in the world to have the techelet on your tzitzit, which is a very important, what I wouldn't even say important, is an essential Jewish mitzvah from the Torah, and if we have an opportunity, we should take it to wear it. Even those who have a doubt about this identification of the techelet shellfish, there's no sin to have it on your talit as a remembrance of the techelet.
Mm-hmm.
The next chapter, and let's say the last chapter in my short talk today, excuse me, is the chemical composition of this dye. And there has been a bit of a controversy among those who are interested in renewing the mitzvah, opposing the identification which I have reached, and that is an issue which is very serious, of course, and I hope that in the near future it'll be possible for us to all agree on the content and the chemical composition of the techelet dye from the original hilazon shellfish. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Speaking about your journey towards techelet, there's somebody who is mentioned. I mean, Tzvi Koren brings him about as well.
Rafi, shout, please.
No problem. Do you hear me now?
Amira.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sidney Edelstein is often mentioned in connection with your work and Tzvi Koren's work.
And
what
who?
role Sidney Edelstein? He's often mentioned.
Okay. Yeah.
So what role did he play in your research journey?
Well, it was important to get the cooperation and the concurrence of other scientists on the identification which I had made, and it depended on certain chemical analyses. And he had published work in which he had performed chemical analyses on this, and so I sent to him the sample which I had prepared, which I showed you on the talit. I sent him a sample to analyze chemically for me in order to make sure that I was in the same route as him. It wasn't actually for me to receive confirmation, but it's important in the scientific discussion and the scientific publication to have opinions of scientists who agree on the identification of the particular chemical compound involved. And but I just sent him one sample, and he's returned the analysis, the figures of the analysis, and that was all. He had no other connection with my work, but he was interested in this. I don't remember now whether it was it wouldn't have been Rabbi Herzog who contacted him. I can't recall now.
Otto Elsner?
Who? Pardon?
Not Otto Elsner, is it?
Who?
Not Otto Elsner?
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But it
Hmm.
was just a routine test analysis. Nothing new in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
Speaking about chemical analysis, can you elaborate on the monobromo indigo, the MBI discovery? When did it happen? What was your involvement with it?
Ah, sure. Okay. The dyestuffs in shellfish purples are derivatives of a chemical compound called indigo, which you may be familiar with as a dyestuff. The dyestuff used in jeans is indigo, synthetic indigo, but the dyestuff of techelet is a derivative of that indigo, and it has the addition of two molecules of bromine. That's dibromo indigo. Two bromine molecules added to the indigo. Now, this compound is what we know from the Bible as the other argaman. That is the other purple of in the Bible mentioned that there are three dyes used in the holy garments and curtains, etc. in the Bible: techelet, argaman, and tolat shani. Tolat shani is made from an insect that lives on trees. Techelet and argaman are made from shellfish, different shellfish. The shell, the argaman is a simpler one. That is what I just mentioned, the dibromo indigo, and that has been known for a very long time. And that was a simple thing to analyze in the methodologies that they had so many decades ago. But regarding the techelet, it was a bit more complicated. Both indigo and dibromo indigo were isolated and found in techelet, and so it was different from argaman. Argaman is just dibromo indigo by itself.
Right, right, right.
When we started trying to make techelet dyed with the shellfish called trunculus, the color which was received was not the blue that I showed you before on my talid, but it was a violet color. That means a reddish type of tint, and this didn't seem to be the right shade for a blue techelet. Of course, the blueness of techelet is something modern, which has just been in the Bible. There's no word blue, no kachol. There's no blue word, so you can't really compare the two the two words as meaning the same thing. On the other hand, the techelet, when analyzed chemically, it had three compounds, three dyestuffs mixed together, all produced from the hyperbranchial gland of the trunculus shellfish. When I discovered that monobromo indigo was present in the techelet. I went to the factory where we were trying to make techelet, and to see how it was being spun into the ptilim. And as I was looking at the vessel, in which they were performing the twisting to make to make a patil, to make a thread, I noticed that the color of the threads of the wool, the color of the woolen threads, was changing from violet to blue. I was amazed. I wondered what could be happening here. Anyway, to cut a long story short, this was the discovery of a very special characteristic of monobromo indigo, that is with only one atom of bromine in each molecule, rather than two as there are in argaman. The color changed just because of the heating of the techelet, and it got a blue color, as we were expecting from the traditional translation of techelet as blue. Now, this is a world-shaking discovery, because it meant that we had now discovered, first of all, a new property. This is called thermochromicity, the heat of the steam inside the vessel in which they were doing this, performing the spinning. The heat of the steam changed the color, and then that change was irreversible. That means it's permanent, and that is what we really wanted for the techelet, for tzitzit, something which would last forever, as it was thought of in antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the main things that were involved in identifying the three chemicals which were which contain, which are the content of techelet. That's it. What was the question again, Rafi?
No, I wanted to know about your discovery of
About the diagram.
when did it happen, and what was the sequence of
Have you got
events.
any questions on that, or is that clear?
I think it's very clear, and I think this question is more so for the audience. I think you've been very clear on that, the color that the chilazon shel techelet produces is irrelevant, because what you're focused on is the chemical properties. There still is color wise. There still is a range of colors using the thermochromatic method, right? When about a year and a half ago, I asked Techeiles to make some thermochromic strings for me, and they turned out to be a little bit of a different blue than they normally produce, right? Using sunlight, it was blue with a hint of violet. But I'm sure that you have asked Techeiles to make many more batches of the strings dyed your method, and they produced a wider range of blues.
Shades.
I'm sorry?
Shades.
A wider range of blue and violet shades.
Oh yeah. Well, you see, this is all based on preconceived concepts which have no basis whatsoever. To think that techelet has to be blue, as I mentioned before, is just was just thought up hundreds of years, only in the Middle Ages, hundreds of years after after techelet had not been seen, or no one knew what they were describing. So you must understand that in the Middle Ages and before the Middle Ages, there weren't all these names for different colors and shades.
Mhm.
Blue was a range of colors. Green, there's all kinds of greens that you can see today. But in those days, they weren't so particular. It didn't have any much meaning, or the various minute changes, differences between one shade and another of the same color. And therefore, to say a certain look today, to look for a certain color or shade for techelet, or for any ancient color, is pointless, because there's no connection with what existed in antiquity. The point to remember is that there is no definition and no way of defining the color of techelet in the Bible itself or in the Talmud itself. The
Mhm.
Talmud just tells us one thing, which is very relevant to what we're talking about this very second, and that is regarding the chemistry. You
Mhm.
may be surprised to hear that there is organic chemistry at the basis of a page in the Talmud, where it tells you there are the techelet can be distinguished from kala ilan. Kala ilan is a dye stuff, a vegetable dye stuff called indigo. And the Talmud says it is possible to distinguish between kala ilan, this vegetable dye, and techelet, the animal dye. It's possible to distinguish between them by a chemical test. Of course, in antiquity, they didn't know the chemistry of the chemical test, but they had found and invented or adopted a test with various additives boiled for a certain amount of time. Those who are familiar with the Talmud can look it up. And the two candidates or for techelet are distinguishable by this test in the Talmudic test, and which I think the Maimonides also brings in the Mishneh Torah. This this test proves that the two cannot be the difference between that makes the techelet. The kala ilan, the vegetable dye, which is indigo, it has this property which distinguishes it according to Talmudic chemistry, right? This test, and the therefore you cannot say that kala ilan is the real source of techelet. Kala ilan is a vegetable dye. Techelet must be something else, not
Mhm.
this simple indigo. And what you're referring to, Rafi, is that there are those in the Patil Techelet who say that this is the that this is the chemical structure of techelet that they sell. It's just indigo also. So it's a bit difficult to understand why at the time in antiquity, in Roman and Greek periods, when these dyes I'm talking about, techelet and argaman, were very popular and was a very big business that is one of the richest. The techelet itself was one of the richest materials, or the richest material that you could buy in those days. The richest was techelet, and so it couldn't have been. I don't think, in my way I look at it couldn't have been that the argaman. Sorry, that the argaman, that the kala ilan is techelet. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean anything, because if it was techelet, they wouldn't need to have invented techelet, because they had it there all the time. That same dye stuff, they had it there all the time at their disposal. They could grow as much as they want to, and they could produce techelet without going through the trouble of fishing at the bottom of the sea for these shellfish that crawl around on the seabed for their to live. And therefore, this is another reason why it's not logical to assume such an identity between techelet and kalailan. The Talmud rules it out. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Maimonides also brings this test to distinguish between the two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question I have is there's a well-known story involving yourself and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Could you share?
Oh, yeah.
There's a well-known story involving you yourself and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach when you spoke with him regarding techelet. Could you share in detail the sequence of events that led to it, what happened, and how did that encounter impact your work on techelet?
When I had reached the scientific proof for the identifying the chilazon species, and that's one, and two, the method of producing from this shellfish a beautiful blue dye, and thirdly, I had the chemical analysis of this dye, dibromo indigo, monobromo indigo, and indigo. Techelet contains all three chemical compounds, all three dyestuffs, but the dibromo indigo and the indigo there in techelet, they do not fix the color. The color, it comes from the monobromo indigo, and that's simple to understand because when you heat it, the color changes from violet to blue, and that is the violet to blue. And what was I saying before that, Rafi?
What you call it? You were talking about techelet, about
Oh, yeah, no, I'm talking now about about Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach.
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, once I reached these conclusions, I didn't quite finish the description, doesn't matter, but once I had reached these conclusions to my satisfaction as a scientist and as a religious person, but as a scientist, as not a question of belief, it's a question of proof. I reached the stage when I wanted to get the agreement, the blessing of the rabbinic sages who decide for us how to keep the mitzvot today. And so I approached one of the pupils of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. I don't remember which one it was, and he arranged for me an interview with the rabbi for that purpose. And so I went to his house there in Mea Shearim, and he received me very nicely. And I gave him a talk, a bit like the talk that I've given here today, explaining the logic behind my identification of this particular chilazon as the chilazon of the techelet, and of this color which I showed him, of this dyed wool, which was the tzitzit on my garment. He listened, and he didn't have any criticism. He said, "This is correct, and you've made a wonderful discovery." But he said, "I'm afraid that I will not at this stage be able to give you an agreement to sponsor it. Why? This is what he told me. He said there was a previous attempt to renew techelet by the Admor of Rajin, and he began to manufacture it according to his theory, manufacture it, and he became a laughing stock and a person who was considered incorrect at all from a religious point of view, from a halakhic point of view, with the techelet which he invented. And Rabbi Auerbach said to me, Dr. Ziderman, you must realize that if I were to give you now my authority to utilize this as the renewal of the techelet, if I would give you my authority, then people would say, Auerbach, he's a second Regina. That means producing something which is the wrong material, but he gave his blessing, so that reflected on him. And he said, this would reflect on me and on my position in the Jewish world, he didn't say actually, as the leading posek. He's too modest for that. But he said, this would reflect upon me. And therefore, my answer to you, Dr. Ziderman, is that when you get one more rabbi, authoritative rabbi, to give his agreement to this techelet, I add my name to his signature.
Mm-hmm. And this was in what was it, 1988, I believe, right?
I can't remember the year. Around then, yeah.
Around then. No, this is groundbreaking, because I mean, because not long after that, I'm sorry, because not long after that, you had there was a maaseh of Joel Guberman's brother getting killed in a car accident in the following year, 1989, and that led Joel to doing research on techelet, and to my understanding, he was introduced to Rabbi Eliyahu Tavger, who in turn introduced him to you. Can you tell me about your perspective on that development, and when the original people founding up Til Techelet joined your Keren HaTechelet?
What? What was the last sentence?
No, and when the original founders joined your Keren HaTechelet.
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch it.
Sorry. When the original founders originally joined your organization.
Who joined?
Joel Guberman, right? Rabbi Eliyahu Tavger.
What do you ask? Why they joined, or when they joined?
About when they joined and what have you.
Oh, how they came to it? Oh, yes.
Yes.
At one of the stages which I've mentioned, once I've received half of a blessing from rabbis Zalman. I wanted to see what was going on. I heard about Rabbi Eliyahu Tevger, that he's spoken to me on the telephone at least, and I began to discuss this whole issue of the techelet with him, and I said, and he himself, basing himself upon the identification of the chilazon, he himself went and dived in the Mediterranean, as laid down by the Maimonides, in the Mediterranean, and collected the shellfish and prepared from them a dyeing of wool for his talit. And I said, okay, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see this. So I said, if we want to get some amount, we have to have a few divers to go and collect them, the shellfish, from the sea bed, because they're only in the sea bed. They don't swim. They just shellfish crawl,
Right.
and so you have to dive a few meters to get to the sea bed in order to collect them. So I said, we need some divers, and someone said, "Oh, well, these three young men who were Americans, they were divers. I'll bring them along, and they can see, and they can dive for us and collect." So that Rabbi Tevga could show us how he does the dyeing, and we could carry on from there. And I organized the whole thing, and someone, I don't remember who, said, "I know two other people who are divers." I think he said, "I'm a diver." So we've got three.
I just want to make a correction. Joel Goodman said that Joel Goodman actually was was the one who was not a scuba diver. Baruch Sturman and Dari Greenspan were scuba divers. They each had their license. Joel did not.
Oh, right. Well, I don't remember exactly, but anyway, that was this was the process, and so they dived and they collected this chedzonot, and it's a well-known story now. And we went to some ruined castle in Akko where we gathered them, I think it was, and no, it was further north. Anyway, and they died, and Elio Tevga died. The wall in front of us
maybe
displayed that it was something which could be done easily if you got the right conditions and the right divers.
Right. I was going to ask you, could it be Achziv, which is like very, very close to Lebanon?
Okay, probably, yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
it's written down. It's all written down in the publications. But once the thing is written down, you don't need to remember it. It's because it's there.
Yeah. Very, very, very fascinating. Okay. So there is that, and a few years later, Baruch Joel and Ari started their own Amuta, and have been dyeing Techeiles the way they've been dyeing, and have been slowly producing Techeiles for over the last number of years, and I believe that it's been gaining wider, more and more widespread acceptance over the last 30 plus years, right?
Yes, sure.
Now one of the biggest issues, is that when you have a larger demand for Techeiles, there's a potential concern. When you have a larger demand for Techeiles, there's a potential concern about the Murex trunculus snails being compromised in the long term. So you mentioned a few years ago that you and a colleague, Muki Spiegel, were researching milking snails native to Eretz Israel in a lab setting, so you'd be able to breed them and milk them and keep them alive, so that there would not need to be a need to kill them and then potentially render them extinct. So what are your thoughts on his contributions to date? How did your paths intersect, and if at all?
Let me tell you, I introduced, what was the name of the chemist?
Muki Spiegel.
Muki. I introduced him to this whole Techeiles business. He is an expert in these sea animals and shellfish and things like that. But he had nothing to do with or any knowledge about Techeiles. But I introduced him. I told him about it, and I don't remember how I met him. But I said to him, "Let me bring to you chedzonot from the seaside. He lives in and worked in Eilat
Hmm.
in the uh,
Down south.
yeah, in the research institute in Eilat, the government research institute, and uh, I said, "Can you try to grow them?" Because my plan was, seeing that the chilazon of the techelet, his name, by the way, is Trunculus. I don't know whether I mentioned it before. The Trunculus, they live in the sea, but by Israel law, one is not allowed to collect them or to use them for any purpose. This is part of the law for preserving nature in the country, but it prevents us from getting chilzonot, shellfish, for making techelet. And so my conclusion from all of the researches which I've been describing in short today in this talk, this was something that he would have to find a way of growing these chelzonot, these shellfish, in captivity, and they're multiplying in captivity, and therefore we would have a source without taking them from the sea, and that's perfectly legal. And so I said to him, see, I'd like you to see whether you can grow them, to reproduce them in your laboratory. And he agreed to do that, and he succeeded beautifully. He left Eilat, and he now is for a few years now in Haifa University, and he has beautiful, enormous area in which he's growing the chilazon itself. It reproduces and grows to be raw material for making techelet, although I don't think it's not used for that. The people involved in that work, in this work, Mokir are not religious, and it doesn't really mean to them so much. But it could be an important contribution to Jewish life, and therefore I wanted to grow them in captivity. Muki has a different interest. He says, why kill each snail in order to remove from it the precursor of the dye stuff of techelet? Let's try and milk the hyperbranchial gland in this shellfish, and we can therefore reuse the same snails again and again if we only milk the fluid from them rather than killing them. That's the project which he's on. I'm not part of that project. Well, I was at the beginning, but at the moment I'm not. I don't have anything really much to do with them, so I can't tell you whether they've succeeded or not. I haven't found in the scientific literature any publication of of success in milking the shellfish, so I can't tell you anymore.
I hear. No. The implications, the implications would be huge if they are successful in breeding and milking these snails, because then there will be a potentially limitless supply of techelet for Am Yisrael.
Sure, but you must remember, you put things in perspective. In South America, there are other species, different ones altogether, that they produce techelet, precursors from their hyperbranchial gland. They are milked. The people there, to make the dye stuff, they milk the chilzonot.
Yeah.
And so the question is, why didn't they milk them here in the Mediterranean? The Romans and the Greeks, why did they kill them if it was possible to possible to milk.
Yeah.
So it's not so simple to think that it's possible to milk, because it wasn't done here. And
Right.
obviously, as you said yourself just now, it's a million times more worthwhile if you could milk them, and all the costs of producing them and fishing for them, getting them from abroad, and all that would all be taken away.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. I don't know when he hasn't published anything yet, so maybe that's a sign of something.
Maybe milking the snails is only a property of this. I'll tell you the name. This Plycopurpura panza. That's the Murex snail in Mexico that has
Yeah.
similar
No, but
monobrominal properties.
yeah, it has the same dye stuff or similar. I don't know if it's the same. Probably supposed to be the same. That's what the publications say. But it's not been used here, so I don't know. I don't know whether how Mulkey is managing with that at all. So I can't tell you.
I hear. Okay, so I think we're out of time. We've spoken for a little over an hour. I want to thank you very much for your time in answering all these questions. The questions that I asked you are in part, some of them are questions from me, and some of them are questions from the audience. So I want to thank you very much, and I want to wish you and everybody here a Shavua Tov, and yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be asked to address you all. Do you know how many people are watching?
With the way it usually works is that not a lot of people are watching now, but this is going to be stored on YouTube and Facebook, and on those channels there's going to be a lot more people reviewing the material, reviewing the content.
Oh, it's there permanently.
And it's there, as far as I'm concerned, it's there permanently. Yes.
I see. Yeah, of course. So you can't know how far it's going to go.
Nope.
Right.
But the beauty of sharing this online is that it can be shared.
You get a report of it, whoever's seen it, don't you?
I can't see specifically who's ever seen it, but I can see how many views. I can see how many people viewed, and also I can see how many people viewed the video, and we could also see who commented, who asked questions. So if there's any further questions, I will definitely send your way.
Rafa, you'll keep me updated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Bye.